Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving into, a challenge that's become incredibly relevant for so many of us recently. How do you lead? How do you manage a team when everything around you just feels completely out of control?
Especially during a widespread crisis like we saw.
Exactly. We've been looking at this really insightful article by SRI, T K Madala, published back in July 2020.
Right in the thick of things.
Yeah, and it specifically unpacks this managerial dilemma. It offers, honestly, a surprising way to think about it. Draws a parallel you probably won't expect.
Yeah, definitely unexpected. So our mission for this deep dive is really to pull out the most actionable, the most sort of human-centered strategies for managers who are navigating that extreme uncertainty.
Right.
We want you to walk away understanding not just what works in these situations, but I think crucially, why certain approaches build trust, why they build stability, even when the world feels like it's spinning.
Yeah.
So we'll look at the core problem managers faced, those common but often, ineffective responses.
Yeah, the go-to reactions that didn't quite land.
Exactly. And then that really illuminating analogy that points towards a pretty powerful solution.
Okay, let's set the scene then. The author immediately drops us right into the heart of the COVID crisis. You remember that feeling, that widespread uncertainty?
Oh, absolutely. Unforgettable, really.
And companies were forced into these drastic measures, reducing headcount, cutting salaries.
Tough calls. Really tough.
And it created this profound dilemma for employees. What happens next? I mean, nobody seemed to know. Not senior management, not HR.
Not even the managers on the ground who are supposed to be the immediate point of contact.
Right. The article calls it a situation from the nature and not in a controllable situation.
Which, yeah, naturally leads to employee frustration, even depression, as the article notes.
Yeah. What's truly striking here, I think, is how the article frames this. It calls it the biggest concern or challenge for every manager. The huge task of maintaining emotional balance in the team while also trying to keep, business going as normal.
As normal as possible, yeah. It perfectly captures that sense of deep helplessness, really, felt by everyone involved. From the top all the way down.
So, faced with this unprecedented pressure, how were managers typically responding?
Well, the article highlights a couple of common reactions, almost instinctual maybe.
Yeah, seems like it. Some managers essentially vanished. They became not available to the team until they have some concrete information from higher management.
Just clammed up, went silent.
Yeah.
And then others, maybe trying to be transparent but perhaps missing the mark.
How so?
They would simply inform the team that everything is out of control and we only have to flow with the tide. Kind of a throwing hands up approach.
Wow. Okay. And the article is pretty direct about how employees felt about that, right?
Very clear. It states quite plainly that employees are not really happy with these kind of responses or behaviors. Which makes sense.
It does make sense. It's easy, maybe from the outside, to critique those responses. But I wonder, what's really going on in a manager's head when they either retreat like that or just sort of throw their hands up?
That's a really crucial point. The article doesn't explicitly psychoanalyze, but it strongly implies it's, a very human response to overwhelming uncertainty.
Like self-preservation almost.
Maybe. Or just a sense of personal powerlessness that unfortunately translates into, a lack of effective leadership in that moment. They might be waiting for clarity themselves.
Right, waiting for the official word.
Yeah, maybe even thinking they're protecting their team from bad news until it's absolutely confirmed.
So the very act of waiting for that perfect information, which feels like the responsible thing to do,
right,
actually creates more anxiety down the line. It's almost worse, isn't it, to be left wondering? Because silence just leaves this massive vacuum.
Precisely. A vacuum for fear, for speculation, for rumor, all that stuff rushes in.
Okay.
And this is exactly the human truth the author taps into with this really ingenious and kind of counterintuitive parallel.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting. Yeah. The author pivots, drawing this compelling parallel with something that seems totally unrelated at first glance.
Autonomous vehicles. Self-driving cars.
Exactly. Right. Traveling in an autonomous driving vehicle, specifically from the perspective of about 5 years before the article, so around 2015.
Early days, relatively speaking.
Yeah. And back then, the automotive world was wrestling with this big question. If a car drives itself, do we even need the traditional dashboard anymore?
Right. The speedometer, the RPM gauge, gear indicator, warning lights.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah. Some predicted they'd be totally obsolete. Others thought, maybe optional.
And what's fascinating is the conclusion the industry reached as the R&D progressed. It wasn't what many expected.
No, quite the opposite. They found autonomous vehicles actually needed more driver information, not less.
Which seems backwards, doesn't it, if the car's doing the driving?
Exactly. But broadening this out, it's all about human psychology. The article really emphasizes this point. When things are not in the control of a human being, driver, none of the passengers in the vehicle will be comfortable or feel safe.
When they are not able to understand what's happening to the vehicle and how it's reacting.
Yeah. Think about that feeling, that complete ambiguity, when there is no information from the vehicle to the passengers. It creates immense discomfort. Anxiety, even.
Absolutely. So what did car makers do? They started adding more and more information exchange, displays showing what the car sees, what it's planning to do next.
Right, things to make the passengers feel, well, like they can trust the machine, to feel safe.
And what's truly powerful here is that realization. Even when you personally have zero control over the steering wheel or the pedals, the flow of information itself is what builds trust. Even if it's just confirming the car is operating as intended, maybe showing the speed, showing the route.
It reassures you.
Exactly. As the article puts it, receiving continuous information from the vehicle makes the passengers feel safe and convinces them that everything is under control and nothing to worry. It's about presence, communication, not necessarily perfect control or perfect news.
Presence, not perfection. I like that.
Yeah. And this analogy, this insight from self-driving cars, leads directly to the article's core recommendation for managers in a crisis.
Yes.
When things are out of control, the only best option left out is continuous information exchange.
Okay. Simple but powerful.
Very. And the direct application for managers is starkly clear. Receiving continuous information from the manager makes the team feel safe, normal, and trustworthy during this uncertainty and ambiguity.
So it's not about having all the answers. It's not about solving the entire crisis single-handedly.
No, not at all. It's about the consistent, deliberate act of communication itself, keeping that channel open.
So given this powerful insight about continuous information exchange, what does it actually look like when you apply it? Especially for those, new or budding managers the article mentions, maybe navigating their first big crisis.
Well, it means a few key things, according to the author. It means staying strong personally, staying motivated as best you can.
Which is hard in itself.
Incredibly hard. And being extremely honest, even if that honesty is about admitting you don't have all the answers yet.
Okay. So transparency about the uncertainty itself.
Exactly. And maybe most importantly, making a conscious effort to stay more connected with your team during this tough times.
So being present.
Yeah.
Being visible.
Yeah.
Being communicative.
Precisely. Even when you're just acknowledging the uncertainty, maybe sharing what you do know, what steps are being taken, even if the final outcome is still unclear. It's about maintaining that connection.
This whole deep dive, it really shifts your perspective, doesn't it, on how we cope with uncertainty.
It really does.
Whether you're metaphorically behind the wheel of a self-driving car or sitting in the passenger seat or actually managing a team through a real crisis. It's such a powerful reminder that sometimes the most effective action isn't about having all the answers or fixing everything instantly.
Which is often impossible anyway.
Right. But it's about maintaining that human connection, maintaining transparency, that continuous flow.
Yeah, it really speaks to a fundamental human need, I think. A need for understanding, for context, maybe even a sense of agency or at least awareness.
Even when true control is completely out of reach.
Exactly. And this raises, I think, an important question for you, the listener, to consider. How might applying this principle, this idea of continuous, honest information exchange, how might that transform other areas of your life or your work where things feel entirely out of your hands?
That's a really good question to reflect on. Where else does ambiguity create anxiety, and how could just keeping the lines of communication open, even without perfect answers, make a difference?
Something to think about.